Hey guys, it's Dee. So in this video, I wanted to answer a really interesting question that someone had, and that was, what is the difference between a concussion and a brain bleed? And I think that's important for us to know because, if you have any sort of arthritis or fibromyalgia or history of seizures, things like that, you have those balance issues, it's easier for us to fall and hit our head. And it's nice to know the difference between the two. So I actually found what the CDC describes for concussions because I'm not as familiar with concussions. My work was in the hospital as a nurse, so I saw more of the brain bleeds, the strokes, that sort of stuff. I didn't see as many concussions. So let me go and share my screen real quick. Okay, we're gonna go here. And, oh, opposite way. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna put the link in the description, but this is basically looking at what a concussion is and what it goes into the fancy pathophysiology. So according to the CDC, a concussion is a mild traumatic brain injury, but it's a complicated one and still can be very serious. And what usually happens when you get a concussion is that it causes those different symptoms like confusion, headache, things like that. And while both a brain bleed and a concussion will have those type of brain related symptoms, the causes are different. So a concussion is going to be caused by, this says neurometabolic dysfunction. That translates basically to the flow of electrolytes in the brain, which can also impact electrical activity in the brain, versus a brain bleed is a structural issue. So when it says a structural brain injury, that means, there's some sort of injury that is causing a leak, like blood is basically leaking from an artery or a vein, and that is going to cause a whole different side of issues. That is going to be a different type of serious than a concussion. Versus with a concussion, you have all those symptoms, but there's nothing structurally going on that's wrong with the brain. It's not causing the brain to go and bleed out, all these different things. It's more of a disturbance in flow, which kind of impacts the more electrical parts of it. So I'm going to scroll down real quick. This is basically what our brain cells look like. Okay, so it's called a neuron. And what happens with the electrical part of the activity in our brains, whether we're feeling something like an emotion, or we're getting, the serotonin, whatever it is, there's basically these little checkpoints that can send electrical messages to each other. So there are different types of cells that do different things in the brain, basically. So in order for one cell in the brain to be like, oh, let me go and do that, it gets an electrical kind of current, kind of like a telephone line from one to another. And that's kind of what helps our brains function, the way that we do. And so when there's something going on with that electrical signal, which also relies on different, oh my gosh, I'm losing the word, different electrolytes. So your calcium, potassium, sodium, all of that stuff is important for these cells to work. And what a concussion does is it kind of disrupts that balance within the potassium and the calcium that is within the cells. And so it causes again, it causes what's called a metabolic dysfunction. And basically it's like an imbalance of these different ions and electrical activity. And so because of that, because it's that kind of issue and not like, oh, you know, there's a leak in an artery or a leak in a vein in the brain going on, you're going to see different symptoms and the severities are going to vary. So that's why when you go and scroll down here, you notice you see symptoms that are related to, you know, thinking, remembering, you know, balancing issues, dizziness, you know, sensitivity, concentration issues, you know, mood issues, because that part of the brain, those neurons, that's what helps our mood. You know what I'm saying? We have a thought, and then our brain responds with the different neurotransmitters, which is what helps us feel whatever emotion we're feeling, you know, and then our body responds to whatever that happens to. And so if you notice here, you can have all of these symptoms with a brain bleed too, but what you're not going to see here, if you notice for concussions, you don't see blood pressures dropping. You don't see, you know, extreme like vital sign changes, like your heart rate changing like severely, like your blood pressure. You know, you're not going to be seeing changes in like your blood cell counts when you take blood samples, or you're not going to see changes in like the acidity level in your blood, because it's not a blood loss issue. It's more of a, ooh, there's an imbalance here going on between the sodium and the calcium and the potassium, and it's basically trying to go and even itself out. So that ends up being the main difference. So while you can have all of these symptoms here with a brain bleed as well as a concussion, you're also going to see with a brain bleed much more severe symptoms, because blood to the brain is like water to a plant. If you don't have that oxygenated blood going through, things start to kind of falter. But you also will see like big changes in blood pressure. You know, the brain bleeds, if they're severe enough, can get you into the hospital. You know, and concussions, they also have that varied thing too. So yeah, that is the main difference. It's just the cause. One is a structural thing, which would be a brain bleed, which is very serious. And then you have concussions, which is also serious. It's just not a brain bleed. It's more of a like an imbalance, like I said, of those different like electrolytes, which impacts like the electrical system temporarily, and it has to balance itself out. So with that said, I'm going to, like I said, leave this article here, so that way you guys can do more research on concussions. And I definitely recommend that if you have any questions, talk to your doctor about it. I hope I answered the question. And with that said, I will see you guys in another video. Bye.